electrician's mate, nuke trained. I did nearly 9, intended to do a full 20 career, but at the end of my second hitch, by the way, a nuke is a 6-year up front. So yeah, 9 was kind of like at 5. I did rolled for another 4, and intended to keep going. But in the mid-70s, they were building nuclear power plants like crazy, and they found out that you could take an engineer out of college, and he had about a 40% chance of passing an NRC exam to be a licensed reactor operator. You could take a high school graduate through the Navy nuclear power program, and he had about a 99% chance of passing through at a senior reactor operator's level. So at the end of my second hitch, a buddy of mine who had got out 6 months before me goes, "Tom, you got it." So they threw enough money at me, I got mercenary. I'm sorry. I went on to become a shift supervisor, senior reactor operator license. I was shift super of the largest boiling water reactor plant in the country. And I did 11 years on shift. I did 7 years in QA, and then I went out the back door as training manager. If you wanted to get a license to operate one, you were in my program. So those are my credentials, and I'm going to not so much talk to you tonight about how a submarine works. I'm going to open up your eyes to what went on in the Cold War that most of you don't know. Is anybody here born after October of '62? Just one. All right. You would not exist today had what we're going to learn tonight, had it been for one guy. You would not be here, and the rest of us, about half of us, wouldn't exist right now. We're going to cover that in detail. Right now, I want to introduce you to the most accurate part of the movie, Crimson Tide. And hopefully get a sound check here. And that is the absolute truth.
Texo, take her down. Take her down, aye, sir. Control bridge. Sounding. Bridge control, sounding 1305.
Can we trim these lights a smidgen?
Turn off the light. Look out. Clear bridge.
Well, I got them all.
That's good. That's good.
All right.
Texo down. Texo is down. Submerge the ship. Diving officer, submerge the ship. Make your depth 150 feet.
Make my depth 150 feet. Aye, sir. Chief of the watch. On the 1MC. Dive. Dive.
Take a look at that. Everybody thinks these are small. No, sir. That's a big SOB.
Make your depth 150 feet. 5 degree down bubble.
That's an Ohio class missile submarine, 24 intercontinental ballistic missiles, 560 feet long, 18,000 tons. That is not a little boat. That is not a little boat. All right, come back. Pause. And close. Okay, so let's get into my spew here. Okay, we have introduced me, and there's a lot of things that we can talk about, how a submarine works, why a submarine works. We're not going to go there. We don't have time. I tried to do that the first time. I did 2 presentations at Wartime Museum, and the first one I was going to try to do everything here and talk about how a submarine works. Nope. We ain't going to get there. We have 2 buttons. One over here, it's called the I believe button. You just push that and say, okay, we'll move on. Don't confuse it with this side. That's the memory dump button. So when we get done here, if there's anything classified, I appreciate everybody push the memory dump button. So, moving on. The little paper I passed out has some explanations about submariners in general. Read it at your leisure, but basically a submariner is a balance between intelligence and stupidity. It's not crazy and it's not ignorance, because you can educate ignorance and you can medicate crazy, but stupid's going to hang around. Okay? Yeah. I mean, that's an absolute truth. So, the reason I say that is it is plain stupid to seal yourself in a tube and sink it in the ocean. I can't come up with a better explanation of why you do that. But you have to be intelligent to do it more than once. So that's that balance, okay? That bit about the boat, there's basically 2 types. I'm going to get into the slide section now. Those are dolphins, and they don't get bigger or better than that, because you see, when you qualify ships, that's what they pin on your chest. And if you look at the back of my little car out front, you're going to find a set of those 2 foot wide. Okay? So, there's 2 basic types of propulsion that we deal with. We have a nuke on the left. We have an old diesel boat on the right. The diesel boat is limited to its battery capacity for its submerged operation. So a diesel electric submarine, basically the diesel drives the generator charges batteries and powers the motor, except when you dive, that diesel can't suck any more air, so you turn it off and you run just on the battery. All right, so it's chained to the surface. It has no choice but to get back up. And that's going to be important in a little lesson we're going to learn here in a little bit about the Cold War. So a diesel boat, or as we call them, smoke boats, they are surface ships that have the ability to submerge. Now let's go over to nukes. On the left you see a true nuke is a true submersible. It is only limited by its food capacity. Makes its own water, makes its own air, cleans the air. If we didn't have the only reason we got to come, other than females and intoxication, we had no reason to come to port except for food. All right. So when a nuke submarine submerges, it disappears. And a patrol cycle for a missile boat, and that's what we're going to talk about. That's what I wrote. Patrol cycle for a missile boat. It's about 105 days. That's a long time being away. The net result is to keep the missiles, especially during the Cold War, aimed at Moscow. We had 2 full crews, captain to cook, everybody in between. Okay, and every 105 days we'd change crews. One would go home into what we call off crew, and the other crew would take the boat. There's about 3 days of turnover. You would then go through a quick refit to figure out, what's broke based on what the off-going crew told you. All right, and then you'd fix that, do a quick shakedown to make sure that you got it fixed, come back, replenish, get underway, submerged, and be gone. And when we dove, we disappeared. We were a wallowing, noisy pile of crap on the surface, but because that prop makes all the noise in the world. Everybody know what cavitation is? It's when you get air bubbles in your prop. Well, when you're too close to the surface, you're going to cavitate. So on the surface, submarines are too easy to find. But once you dove, right, you became a hole in the water. That's the only way you could find us, was to look for some place where nothing was going on. That was us. So, now that's your propulsion. Within the propulsion, now in nukes especially, we have two different types of boats. The one at the top would be a fast attack, and the one at the bottom we refer to as a boomer, an FBM, Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine, FBM, BM, boom. Okay. Today's boomers carry 24 Trident D5s. We'll talk a little bit more about those later, but the only difference between that submarine at the top and the bottom is that 150-foot long section full of what we referred to as Sherwood Forest, full of missiles. All right, because it was like you were walking through a forest full of these big trees. All right, but the front end, the back end, pretty much the same. It's just the difference between those two, the missile load. I've got more of those little handouts somewhere here. Anyway, they're up here, of course. Here. Those can be fabulous for distribution. I'll get a couple of those handed around. All right, moving right along. So we got attacks and boomers. The best anti-submarine device out there is another submarine, and that's what an attack submarine is all about. Its job is to find the enemy. Okay? We also have something that we planted in the ocean a long time ago, even my days, and I was riding in the 60s and the 70s. It's called SOSUS. SOSUS is an hardwired underwater microphone system. All right, basically, it's a set of sonar domes that just listen. All right, we've got them all over. They were able to find the location of the scorpion by triangulation of the noise from 3 different points via SOSUS and say, it's here. Found the thresher the same way, but they knew where the thresher was because they were operating with it when they lost it. So, the sound that travels, and today's sonar systems are so sophisticated it's almost scary. So in anti-submarine operations, you're dealing with basically surface. You see the ships on the top, they can carry helicopters, and helicopters are good at what they put in the water called a sonobuoy. You can just drop it in and it radios back to the helicopter. So it's listening for what's going on out there. That can all be connected to one another to find that submarine. So between SOSUS, that's when a Russian submarine came down the pike, leaving Murmansk or wherever, Vladivostok or whichever, they would pass over the SOSUS network, and by the time they got to open water, they had an escort. That escort was in a Navy, one of our attack submarines, pulled right in behind, okay, and just stayed there. A buddy of mine, may he rest in peace, was on board the particular boat that was anybody heard of a Typhoon class Russian? They're monsters. As big as our big Ohio class are, the Typhoon's bigger. And the first one of those that came down the pike, my buddy was, technically he was a radioman, but yeah, him and Whitey Mack, the commanding officer of the Lapon, tracked that sucker for a month right here. And everywhere that boat went, right? Everybody seen Hunt for Red October? That big Russian, that was a Typhoon, okay? And Caterpillar Drive was kind of a stretch, but the boat itself was a Typhoon. Big boat. But Tommy said that they spent so much time tracking that first Typhoon, they gathered all kinds of data, took periscope photography of the whole boat front to back, and got to the point where they would made up names for who was driving at the time, because the guys on the helm had particular idiosyncrasies of how they did what they did. And, you know, there was a standard turnover, according to my buddy, that, part of the turnover was Igor's on dive right now, right? Because, you know, they knew the characteristics 1 month. They were never detected, okay? But they were ready. If the missile doors ever went open on that Typhoon, it wouldn't exist no more. So that makes another way to find submarines is the via air. Do we have the prop on the bottom is a P3 Orion, all right, and the one on the left is the jet replacement, now the P8 Poseidon. So those were capable of flying low over, and that tail is pointed. This is a magnetic anomaly detector. Okay, so if we have a disturbance in the iron, if you wish, in the water, it goes, ooh. I had an opportunity to chat with a sonar operator off of a P3 Orion. I said, did you ever find a boat? He goes, yeah. I said, really, what? He said, it was Ohio class. I said, great. I said, what was your range? He said, 300 yards. My response was, the commanding officer of that boat was asked to make your day. 300 yards. Last time we played that game with another boat, we had detected them at 13,000 yards. All right, 300 yards, that's a chip shot. Or actually, probably a putt for those that are golf. So,
I got a question.
Sure.
If the one boat blows up the other one when they blow their hatches,
Yeah.
are they goners too?
No. The boat that fired the torpedo at the enemy? No. First of all, the anti-submarine torpedoes are not that huge. All right, they don't have to be. You're not trying to destroy the boat. You're just trying to let the water in.
Right.
The water will do all the. You put a little hole in it, okay? That's all you need. All right, the ocean will take care of the rest.
But the nukes don't go off.
Pardon?
The nukes don't go off then.
No, no. There's it's getting a nuke to go takes more than you know. Anyway, the third way to find a submarine is with another submarine, and we alluded to that. Now, what we see here is the sonar array of a Virginia class, and that's the latest and greatest. Okay, I had the honor of touring a Virginia class this last May when I run the Reunion Association for my boat, and me and the captain and the cob, COB, chief of the boat. Right, me, my cob, and my old commanding officer got the privilege of one Virginia class in at Subbase New London when we were at Reunion, and the three of us toured. Boy, is it different. Boy, we had a lot of room. You saw that opening little video. They don't. They really crammed a lot of stuff into this. This thing is 17 foot longer than a Los Angeles class and 1 foot wider. Okay, but it is packed with stuff. And you have arrays on that big sphere in the front. That's a sonar array. You'll notice the torpedoes, if we can show it to you, don't come out the front of today's boats. They come out from the bottom, out the sides at angles, because we can make them go where we want them to go after they leave. So the other thing is that all those scopes and antennas in the sail, that section that stands up is more rarely referred to as the sail. Those used to be like optical periscopes, you know, you're looking at mirrored and so on, and not today. So in my day, your control room was your highest level. There's 3 levels in this boat, and a kind of a basement. Today's control room in the Virginia class is in middle level, and that periscope doesn't have any optics in it at all. I didn't do that. It's a camera. It's just a little small mast that just needs to, you know, the one we had, when that bottom of that scope went down, it went to the bottom of the boat. Today, it just tucks into the sail. So, and the other thing is, because it's a camera and the output goes to a TV screen, it used to be only the captain got to see what was in the periscope. Now everybody on board can see what's in the periscope because there's monitors everywhere. So that, and you'll notice that arrays, there's side arrays, there's a trail array. Behind the boat is where you're blind. You have no hearing behind the boat. You're in what we call the baffles. The noise of your prop and so on. So we had no way of knowing what was behind us. So in our day, we did what was called a baffle clear. Every so often, to make sure there was nobody behind us, we'd make a turn and go, huh, right? And by the way, the bit about, sonar, you've seen all the movies, they go ping, beep. No, that's active sonar. We don't use active sonar. Active sonar transmits. If you transmit, somebody go, oh, there he is. All right, we just do this. I hear something over there. And I got real worried when we were in ice pack. I'm going, okay. I understand rotating equipment makes noise. Icebergs don't have rotating equipment. And my buddy in sonar goes, hey, no problem. Puts a headset on me and goes, you got one over here. You could hear it. Sounded like somebody was frying bacon. I said, what's going on? He says, they melt. And as they melt, the gas comes off and you hear the sizzle of the gas bubbling up from the iceberg. So we were very easy to drive our way through the ice just by listening to the ice.
Can't you guys identify a ship just from the screw sound? Like just by the way the screws sound, is that true?
Yes.
You can?
And the sophistication of the Virginia class sonar, that sucker can come out of the English Channel, right, and not only detect a ship leaving New York Harbor, it can tell you which one it is.
That's impressive.
Yeah. Do not mess with the Virginia class boat. They are tough. So that is our number one anti-submarine device, and it's replacing the Los Angeles class. As we put a new Virginia in, they take an old 688 out. So next, we had to create a device, and this goes to a document that I've actually had the pleasure of reading, called the Nobska document. And in the 50s, early 50s, Woods Hole Oceanographic was asked by the Navy to take all your great experts and sit them all in one spot and say, what's going to be the best way to prevent war with Russia? And in the aquatic arena, how will we do this? And remember, in the Nautilus, the first nuke wasn't launched until 1954. And in 1954, Woods Hole says, here's what you need. You need a nuclear-powered submarine that can carry a missile that can be launched from subsurface, all right, that can then go. Now, think about that. They were talking technology that did not exist. And that session was in 1954 while the Nautilus was being commissioned. The report itself was promulgated in 1955, January 55. And 6 years later, from the 54 concept, the USS George Washington was commissioned as the first sub-launch ballistic missile submarine. They created the technology. Now you're using it today and you don't even know it. That solid rocket propellant that's in a, by the way, we didn't have to surface because our rockets were on solid fuel, okay? The Russians at that time decided they could come up with a couple, but they were, we got to surface and then we got to fuel them and then, they got to launch from the surface. No. We don't do that. All right. Our solid rocket propellant, right? Once we light that sucker off, hasta la bye-bye. It's gone.
How are the torpedoes? Are they solid?
No. Most of the, well, we've got 3 types of torpedoes. We were still carrying World War I Mark 14s. Those are steam driven, little alcohol burners, made steam, turned a turbine, boom, when it went. Then they came up with electric drive, Mark 37. And it was the Mark 14 was an impulse out where you had to get it out of the tube. The 37 was a swim out electric drive and trailed a cable, and you could drive it all the way you wanted. But the problem with the 37 was it was a little slow, and the Russians started building boats that they didn't care so much about shielding, but they wanted speed. And the average Russian attack could outrun a Mark 37. So we said we need something better than that, and they came up with the Mark 48. The Mark 48 advanced capacity will outdrag a Chevrolet, okay? That thing is an exotic gas, if you wish, and I can't even tell you what they're burning because I don't know. I was an electrician, okay? Torpedoman worked that out. But yeah, you ever see these pictures of a torpedo breaking a destroyer in half? That's an ADCAP 48, I'll guarantee it. All right, they do not make contact. They go off below the keel. And the pressure on the upward of that explosion, you got a lot of pressure below it. All right, so it says, well, all this expansion's got to go somewhere. It finds up is easier than down, so that shock wave goes up and literally breaks the ship's keel right in half. I've seen pictures of what they call a sink exercise, where they took an old destroyer they were decomming and say, take it out there, put it there, and blow it up. One of my favorite stories about that is a Sink X where the Navy was using, their guns and their rockets and everything, and the destroyer's sitting there going, sure, yeah, okay, another shot. And it wouldn't go down. And finally they said, okay, and they called in one submarine, 148 ADCAP, out of here, one shot. So the bit about the submarine as a deterrent force is very real. Everybody remember the Falklands? You're too young.
I heard about it.
You read about it. That proved my point. The British and the Argentines were battling out surface, bang, 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 rockets and guns, and they didn't care, and everything was fine. And then one Brit nuke showed up on station and fired one ADCAP 48 and sank the biggest cruiser that they had, and the entire Argentine Navy went to shore and didn't come back up. All right. That was over. So, proved my point. The picture you have in front of you is Holy Lock. All right. There's a tender and a floating dry dock in the middle of the lock. The lock's about 90 feet deep. There's a river off to the right of that picture that is accessed, and that's where I spent a lot of time. They created Refit Site 1, is what was officially referred to, and Squadron 14 operated out of it. And the reason they created it was that the Polaris missile only had about an 1,100 mile range. Now think about that. If you got 1,100 mile range and your target is Moscow and you got to leave New London, you got to travel a long, long, long way before you are offensive. Okay? You aren't going to make much of a deterrent if you're over half of your patrol cycle is just getting to your station. So that's when they created Holy Lock in the very early 60s, and it's going to be important here in a little bit when we talk about what happened. But that Refit Site 1 was the home base for me when we were operating technically out of New London, but the boat was operating out of Holy Lock. So we'd fly over, change crews, and take the boat. But what we tried to do is put all boats of the same class at the same location. So that covered the Mediterranean and such, and the Lafayette class was heavily out of Hololock. The point there, they all on the surface all look the same. They're all painted black. You paint their numbers out, you paint the name on the side out black, and now you go past that trawler and he goes another ship coming in or out, and he doesn't know if that's one leaving. We didn't know if they thought, yeah, they didn't know who we were. Before this evening's over, we're going to dispel that myth. So Hololock was significant, and it was determined no longer needed at the end of the Cold War in '91 with the advent of, we went from the A-1 Polaris with 1,100 mile range up to my day of a C-3 Poseidon with a 3,500 mile range. Right, and now you're talking the D5 Triton with a 5,000 mile range.
Where's that location?
Hololock, Scotland.
Where?
Scotland.
Okay.
You know, the northern part of England. Yeah.
Cold and like tonight.
Don't ever tell a Scotsman that, unless you want to duck. I'm sorry, what was your question?
No, I was just going to say, it's about the same weather you have up there as we're having right now in the wintertime. So the weather up there is a little bit colder.
A little bit.
Yeah.
It's darn near in the Arctic Circle. When my older brother lived in Presqu'île, Michigan for a bit, and we were chatting one time about the Northern Lights and how pretty they were, and I said, yeah, they're pretty impressive. He goes, where have you ever been to see the Northern Lights? And I said, Hololock. And he goes, well, how far north is Hololock? And I said, well, you know where you are in Presqu'île, Michigan? He goes, yeah. Well, you know how far that is above Atlanta? He goes, yeah. I said, well, that's how far Hololock is above Presqu'île, Michigan. If you think you saw Northern Lights in Presqu'île, Michigan, you ought to come to Hololock. So, Hololock is extremely significant. And what do we got? Next slide. That's basically a lovely photo, or not a photo, but a painting of what missile handling would be alongside that tender. That's 2 Lafayette class boats, and that tube contains the missile for transfer. And once that's lined up and on the deck over the hatch, that's when it's then lowered. It's never, the whole unit is lowered to the deck from the tender. Right, once it's on, the transfer from the tube goes into from the transfer tube to the missile tube on the boat. So when that's going on, there's nothing but Marines with machine guns on that side of the tender. And no cameras, etc. So this is an artist's rendition of missile handling in Hololock. Now, I'm going to get into a rather interesting story. And the reason I said that that you wouldn't be here and half of us wouldn't be here except for what happened, Cuban Missile Crisis, October 1962. Okay, I was in high school. This is before my career. I found out more about this Cold War after I left it than while I was fighting it. But that's a Foxtrot Russian submarine. A Foxtrot Russian submarine is a diesel-electric smoke boat. It's tied to the surface. The problem with the Foxtrot is it's designed for northern waters.
Oh, okay.
So they have heaters on board. And 4 of those, during the Cuban Missile Crisis, were dispatched to Cuba. They were not ready for Caribbean waters. Most everybody on board got down to their underwear, okay? Because there was no cooling and the sea was too warm and they're running. The other thing is the Foxtrot was a derivation of what they learned from the Germans, okay? And the Germans had something during World War II in their submarines that we did not have. It was called a snorkel. Anybody know what a snorkel is? our boats during World War II had to surface in order to fire up their diesels. But with the snorkel, you could draw air in and remain submerged at periscope depth, okay? But most all the boat is gone except for this snorkel mast. So the Foxtrot was equipped with a snorkel. This is 62, so, right? And they're tied to the surface, but they were told from Moscow, you must get there fast and not be detected along the way. So running submerged with the snorkel, they could do about 11 knots, and that's about as fast as you could think about. So they were hauling from Russia to the Caribbean, right, submerged, all four of them. Once they got there, they weren't going to hang around with their snorkel up, but they were doing their job, whatever their assignment was. But the big deal was is that each one of those four had a torpedo on board that was nuclear warhead. And they had specific orders. In order to fire this, there's these conditions that have to be met. And one of those conditions was concurrence from the captain, the political officer, and the weapons officer. All three have to say, yes, we are meeting the criteria for release of nuclear material. Anybody ever heard of a hold down? You got a bunch of surface ships like aircraft carriers and destroyers and so on that are milling around in that blockade around Cuba. And they have their sonar and they have their helicopters that are doing dipping and so on. And they discovered one of those four. B159 was this number. B159 was detected. And then it was like, hey, we found one over here, guys. So, of course, everybody went to play. And the destroyer said, well, we know it's not one of ours. And then they started saying, well, let's get him up. Well, when they played games, and military exercises, let's face it, are games, okay? They're playing games. When they play games with submarines, they use depth charges. But they don't really want to destroy our submarines, so they have a little hand grenade-like depth charge that just is enough of a harassment to let you know you're being without killing you in the process. So the destroyers that are preventing B159 from surfacing and recharging, okay, are harassing it by throwing in these test depth charges. Well, it got worse, and of course the longer you go submerged without coming back up to run your diesels and charge your batteries, the lower your battery capacity becomes, and the interior becomes worse and the air becomes worse because that snorkel also brings fresh breathing air in. They didn't have the sophisticated atmosphere control that we have in today's nukes. So the whole boat was being inundated by this hold down by the U.S. destroyers, to the point that the captain and the political officer on B159 determined that they had met criteria for nuclear release. And a gentleman named Valasy Akapov, the weapons officer, said, no, you don't. Think what would have happened if he'd have said yes. They'd have fired a nuclear torpedo that would have cleared out a major portion of the flotilla that was in that blockade. And everybody would know there was nuclear weapons used. And what would that produce? World War III would have occurred in October of 1962. You wouldn't be here, and half of us probably wouldn't have survived it.
The rest would stick in Russia.
So the true hero,
Be dead in line in grade school.
the true hero
Not that much.
of the Cuban Missile Crisis is right there. His commanding officer's name was Valentin Savinsky. The political officer was Ivan Nastalinkov, and this was the weapons officer, Vasily Akapov. That man is the reason we're still breathing fresh air today. When we were on our boat during the Cold War, we kind of had a standing understanding amongst us that we weren't sure of who was going to fire the first shot of World War III, but we were damn sure who was going to fire the last shot of World War III. We're not going to concern ourselves with World War IV because you're going to do that with clubs and rocks. There ain't going to be anything left. So the big deal on this, and another point is, remember that other picture at Holy Lock?
Yep.
When the entire system went to defensive condition 2, okay? DEFCON 1 is war. DEFCON 5 is peace. And right now I think we're about 4. But the morning after the declaration to go to DEFCON 2, right, by Kennedy, and he's telling Khrushchev, pull your missiles out, right? That's what Holy Lock looked like. Nothing. There was 5 boats of the George Washington class, all 5 were assigned to Holy Lock in 1962. There were no other operational missile boats. And the Lincoln was half disassembled in refit, right, tied up to the tender. The tender was the Proteus, a World War II submarine tender, AS-19. And the next morning, not only was the Lincoln gone, the Proteus was gone. Holy Lock was empty. And I'm pretty sure that, you know, there was a big deal about the blockade that said, okay, we're serious. But I'm pretty sure when Khrushchev got tapped on the shoulder that morning, and because they got spies there, and said, you know, there's 80 missiles aimed at Moscow, and we don't know where any of them are at right now. And then he went, maybe we should take our missiles out of Cuba. I think dolphins had more to do with it than most people will admit. So, the next portion of this little story is this gentleman here, and I use that term gentleman very loosely. Anybody ever heard of Johnny Walker?
Likely.
How many of you think it's a Scotch? Johnny Walker is not allowed to be served at any reunion I set up. That is Jonathan Anthony Walker, right there. That man was a communications technician warrant officer at the Pentagon in the late 60s. And he started selling code. Now, our communication system is like the old World War II. You ever heard of Enigma? The German Enigma machine? Well, our system, Enigma was a mechanical device. Our electronics equipment is very similar to that concept, where you have a machine that will decode the message, but you got to have the right code to put into the machine so it knows what function it is. So you think of the code as software and the machine as hardware. All right, he was selling code. We didn't learn that until 1985.
Is that why he's wearing handcuffs?
Yeah. That is not a picture of him in 1967. And the sad part is he set up a ring, all right, to continue after he retired, including his brother and his son. Okay? So he was selling coke. And in 1985, we found out about it, and I love this story. His ex-wife he had a lot of money. His ex-wife went to the FBI and said, my ex-husband is selling code, and I want more money, and he won't give it to me. So she turned him into the FBI. And what did the FBI do? This disgruntled ex-wife. Yeah, they showed her the door, okay? And about 6 months later, remember Jethro Gibbs?
Yeah.
The equivalent of him in real life, and NCIS heard that, wait a minute, you're telling me that you got a guy that's selling code and his wife turned him in the FBI? And they went, so Gibbs and Company, NCIS, went and looked into it, and they dug into his bank accounts. You know, probably can do that. And they said, this guy's got way too much money for a retired warrant officer. And they come to find out, they arrested him and jailed him in '85. He got a life sentence with no possibility of parole. He avoided the death penalty by turning over his brother and his son. All right. He died, I don't remember the exact date, but went through the submarine community like grease through a goose. And that night the night he died in prison, every one of us at 8 o'clock Eastern time raised a glass in hopes that he was not going up. I'm in a church, I'm not going to use the other tours. So Jonathan Walker was the arch enemy till 1985. Now, in '85, they went, well, he was selling coke. So, it doesn't work without the hardware. And we kind of set that on the back burner. Remember, I got out in '75. So, we're going to get back to this in a little bit. Okay, the next section I want to talk about is this little device here. When you leave Holy Lock and get into open water, we can't dive unless we've got what we call 50 fathoms, 300 foot of water underneath us. My boat's 425 foot long, 8,000 tons. It's a little smaller than today's Ohio class, but it's still a substantial boat. We passed one of these every time we went by, and we thought nothing of it. Because, you know, hey, we got our numbers painted out, we got our name painted out, and they don't know if we're going on patrol or if we're going on sea trials, right? And one of my favorite stories about a trawler, we call it an AGI, Auxiliary General Intelligence Gathering, was a dear friend of mine, Captain Clayson, Blue Crew, was surface transit to the dive point and gets the word that the trawler is running in our wake and drawing water samples. Arl, he's no dummy. Arl, all right, does anybody know how you flush a toilet in a submarine? There's a tank that it goes to, and when the tank is full, then you isolate the tank and you blow it over the side. All right, it's called blowing sanitaries. Trawler's drawing samples in the wake of the green. What's the captain do? Orders all the sanitaries to be blown. And says, let him sample that. I loved Arl. Arl was a great guy. So, we never thought much of it until after the Cold War. Like I said, I learned more about the Cold War after I got out of it. What we didn't see, and you see a little white circle? What we didn't know was this. They could only load those torpedoes not from inboard. They had to be in a dry dock, open the outer door, insert the torpedo, but they carried 2 torpedoes. This is port side, the one just like on the starboard side, and that whole bow was a sonar dome. All right, they had an offensive capability. Now, every time we went by one, we just kind of thought, ha ha. They were a lot more deadly than we realized. And I found out about that around 1998. So, slide, we go to AGI dock. So now, where did all this stuff start come together? Well, it comes here. And this stuff here on the table that we're going to take a good look afterwards. In 2003, I created the Reunion Association for the boat I qualified on. No boat's as good as the one you qual on. Okay? And it's a long story about that, but you know, basically, until you're qualified, you're a nub. Anybody know what a nub is? Pardon?
Somebody doesn't know anything.
Non-useful body, NUB, non-useful body. You occupy airspace, food, and water. We ain't got a lot of any of it. Okay? So until you, and therefore you are not trustworthy. All right? You have to learn every system, stand every watch. All right? The whole boat. I mean, and then after all your system checked outs are done, right? Then you go into a three-man board from 3 different departments, and they grill you for an hour or 2, and then after you pass that board, then you go through a walkthrough. And I had the weapons officer for my walkthrough. We started in the torpedo room. He says, how do I load a torpedo? He don't actually do it. And I had to go through the step. I'm an electrician. All right? I'm a reactor operator. All right? That went on all the way down, through the missile compartment, etc. And I told you, you're using our technology today. Everybody got an airbag in their car? I tested mine about the end of September, head-on collision. It worked. That airbag is deployed by a piece of our solid rocket fuel that's about the size of your thumbnail. That's all it is, just a teeny tiny chip. And it blows up that bag big. I can testify in court on that. So, that technology that we created in the 60s to make this work, damn impressive, and you're still using it today. Solid rocket boosters that were on the space shuttle. All right. So when we created the Reunion Association, we got a president, a vice president, a webmaster, treasurer, storekeeper, set up the whole thing in 03. And Dale Schoflin set up the web page so that if you were looking to find out where anybody on the 636 was, you said USS Nathaniel Green to Google, and my name and phone number came up. So in 2007, a lovely young lady on the left gives me a call. And she says, my dad's in town and would like to speak to somebody that was on the Green in October of 74. I said, well, I was on the Green in October of 74. But where's in town? She says, New York City. Come to find out, she is with the United Nations. And she speaks English fluently. But she's from St. Petersburg. And I don't mean Florida. Okay? St. Petersburg, Russia. Her dad, Veniamin Azarev, was a junior officer on a Juliet class attack Russian, and he knew that we were leaving Holy Loch, the River Clyde, etc. He knew the name of the boat, he knew the date and the time. So I hooked him up. I said, look, I'm nowhere near New York, but my old commanding officer is in New Haven, so we got them connected. And Kerry Gentry and Veniamin had a lovely chat, and we learned a lot. Most everything I'm telling you on the Russian perspective of this came through this meeting. This stuff I got here on display is from that meeting. But they went on, and I had them at the 08 reunion as our keynote speaker, and if you want to close the book on the Cold War, have dinner with your enemy. We presented him a hand-carved wooden model of the boat, and I gave him a challenge coin and gave him a salute and a thumbs up. We had a common enemy, the water. We were both just doing our jobs, and his speech was phenomenal because he said, look, we were all professional enough not to unleash the hounds of war. Okay? And we were basically brothers. We're enemies, but we're brothers as submariners. And if you ever see a submarine movie, there's a Operation Pacific with John Wayne where they, in a submarine, sink a Japanese submarine, and the junior officer goes, hey, and everybody looks around and everybody's just staring at him because they know they just killed their brothers. All right? Submariners are a strange, tight-knit group. So, we honored one another. We respect one another. And I haven't heard a thing from him since all hell broke loose with Russia and Kiev, Ukraine, and so on. And communications just stopped. But by the way, that blue flag, that's a jack flag, okay? And that's from the Nathaniel Green. And that ensign behind it, that's an ensign that flew from the fantail of the Nathaniel Green. So that's the big deal there. That's how all this rather interestingly gelled, but how did he know? Research found it. Research found it. That's an artist's misconception of the encounter. They came in shallow into the Irish Sea. They dove in deeper water, but they, once you're down, running at periscope or slightly under, easy to do. Right? We couldn't initiate the dive until we were in deeper water. They were in shallow and pulled right up underneath our rudder. So when we were on the surface, we were a noisy SOB. But here's when you do something like dive, remember that opening little video, prepare to dive? All compartments must be rigged and reported, rigged for dive. There's a bill, a procedure in each compartment for what you should have, alignment for dive. There's nothing on the bill that says, contact the Russian submarine under your rudder and tell them you're going to dive. We caught them off guard. We made contact. The bottom of our rudder, but the Russian, that's a I actually did this painting and made a canvas print of it and presented it. It's hanging in Benjamin's office in St. Petersburg. But that what you can't tell in that photo is that their submarines at that time were covered in about 4 inches of rubber. All right, so that noise like sonar wouldn't ping off of it. All right, it also helped for insulation. We tore, our rudder tore the rubber on the bow of their submarine on the dive. Benjamin says they darn near bounced off the bottom of the Irish Sea trying to avoid contact, but yeah. So that's how close they got, but we still didn't know why. And then research said that. Anybody know what that is? It's an AGI, but it's a U.S. Auxiliary General Intelligence. Pardon?
Is that the one in Korea or whatever?
Yes, Pueblo. She's still commissioned, and she's still in Korea. Okay? When did they seize the Pueblo? 6 months after John Walker started selling them code. They had time.
They had the machine now.
They were reading our orders before we were. They were able to reverse engineer all of the machinery, okay? And all of that didn't stop until 1985. The Cold War ended in 91. So in 74, Benjamin knew exactly what boat that was, exactly what time. We didn't open our orders until after we dove. Our orders would tell us where our assigned area was. If we were in our assigned area, every one of our missiles could reach its target. And we didn't know what they were. It's not like today's missiles that you can change the program and say, yeah, use GPS and go here. Right? No. What we did was we had computers that were big and heavy and hardwired and capsules. And we would say, okay, this goes in the launch door for missile 4, and this capsule goes into missile 4, okay? And all we knew is if we ever got launch codes was which missiles to fire. The missiles knew where they were going. We didn't need to. Does that make sense? That we were in our area able to reach every target. That's all we knew. So our job was to go out there, disappear, make no noise, 4 knots to nowhere, mill about smartly, do a baffle clear every now and then. Okay? Anybody ever see Hunt for Red October again? We got that? Do you remember the guy yelling out, Crazy Ivan? Mm-hmm. We had our baffle clear, we had 6 different clears, and we used a dice. When we did one, we'd take and roll that dice and say, oh, 3. All right, in 3 hours, we're going to do another baffle clear. And then we roll it again, and we're going to do baffle clear number 5. All right, so we had 6 different baffle clear maneuvers, and we, at the randomness of the roll of the dice, would determine which one to do and when. The Russians only had one maneuver. It's called a Crazy Ivan, and what they would do is they're trucking along this way, and they would do a 180 turn and come right back their own track. And if you were following them, it's not a good day. A lot of this occurred on occasion. So that's the Pueblo. All right, and that's the significance to this whole Cold War presentation. That we were closer than we knew, and they knew more than we thought.
So they were reading everything.
Yeah. Until 1985. And then 6 years later, it didn't matter. The other thing of interest I want to kind of allude to, and I've got a little video to show, did you know that those missiles that are launched from the submarine don't get wet? Does everybody understand about pressure when you've been to the bottom of the 12-foot swim pool and your ears kind of pushed a little bit? Well, the deeper you go, the more that pushes. If you could blow up a balloon down at the bottom of that 12-footer and made it as big as you could make it, tied a knot in it, and then let it go, it'd get even bigger by the time it got to the surface, because you blew it up at the pressure that it surrounds. Well, when we launch a missile, what we do is we have a hatch, right, that's very strong and holds back the big pressure. But before we open it, we need to equalize pressure. So we come to what's called a hover, all right, because we don't want that missile, when it leaves the hatch, can do this real good, but it doesn't do that real good. So there's a fiberglass dome that's got det cord laid into it that caps over the bird. And so when to open the hatch, you have to equalize that pressure of sea pressure to the tube pressure. And you do that within just a couple of inches differential to the outside sea pressure, but you do it for a tactical launch where you're actually sending the bird away, you're doing it with nitrogen. For a test or for a drill, we do it with air and then vent it back into the boat. So when it's time to go, that bird is encased in a nitrogen bubble. And there's a special impulse device that blows it out of the tube. It's like a trash can with a big heavy, it's like a big strong garbage can with an explosive charge and water. And when that explosive charge goes off, it turns all that water to steam, which is routed underneath the bird, and away she goes. And as she goes up, all that high pressure air that was put inside it is now, as it's passing, it's the pressure around it's becoming reduced. So it's venting all that air. And that continues, so it's in a bubble, fired all the way to the surface. And not until it clears the surface and hesitates. Because at a certain point going up, it can't go up no more, and it's left the water. And at that moment of hesitation is when the solid rocket fires, and away she goes. But yeah.
Nitrogen's in the liquid state too, isn't it? When
Pardon?
it's stored. Nitrogen's in the liquid state when it's stored, right?
Nope.
No?
Gas. We don't have to launch from huge deep. Yeah. Now we weren't sophisticated enough to carry liquid nitrogen. We were lucky to carry air. So yeah, but we did make our own oxygen out of seawater. So with that, what I got next is, I think I'm running all the way around.
What do you do with the hydrogen then?
We blew that overside. Where I want to go now is out of here. Let's get smaller. And let's go here. What I want to show you now is a launch. And then we'll open this up to, Any further questions?
When the concept of a submarine-launched missile was first proposed in 1955, skeptics said it could never work. But the successful launch of a Polaris test missile from the submarine USS George Washington on 20 July 1960 ushered in the era of the fleet ballistic missile, and the Navy's submarine-based weapon system has stood the test of time. The Navy's first fleet ballistic missile, the Polaris A-1, had a range of 1,200 nautical miles. The Polaris program extended the missile's reach, achieving a range of 2,500 nautical miles with the A-3 missile. Then the Poseidon, or C-3 missile, introduced multiple warheads, each capable of reaching a separate target, significantly enhancing the system's effectiveness. And the Trident development program resulted in a more survivable deterrent, an improved missile with a range of 4,000 nautical miles, and a new submarine, faster, quieter, and most of all, larger, carrying 24 missiles instead of 16. The Trident II, or D-5 missiles, carried on board the Tennessee-class submarines, the newest and most powerful in the Navy's underwater arsenal, incorporate major advances in missile design and manufacturing. For example, graphite epoxy, an extremely strong yet lightweight material, is used for the casings of the solid propellant rocket motors. This, along with other advancements, allows the Trident II missile to achieve a range greater than the 4,000 nautical mile reach of the Trident I. When the concept of a submarine-launched missile was first...
Yeah, I thought that pie shaping of that dome was very visual in that, but it's not obvious that there's a little ring that goes first, and then there's a minor delay. The nose of the bird goes up into that ring and starts to carry that dome away with it, and then as it gets a couple of feet away, the rest of it pie sections out. And the reason is that you notice at the end of that launch, all that water was rushing into that empty tube. That bird weighed 20,000 pounds. That tube's going to fill up with 40,000 pounds of water. Boat's getting heavy. Okay? Can't do that. And if you put it in automatic ripple launch every 15 seconds, it's getting 20,000 pounds heavy. So what happens is that hatch has got to go closed immediately, and then they open up valves and blow half the water out. Okay? And they got to make sure that that pie section occurred on that, so that hatch doesn't get fouled by a piece of that stuff. And if one of the portions of those domes get in the way, you'll never get a seal on that hatch. And you're going to be, by the way, if all the birds are gone and you don't have the weight put back in the boat can't submerge.
Here, I'll get it.
You got it. Okay. So, this the stuff I got up here, that's my boat. This is my homage to the Cold War. That's Berlin Wall in the middle. Okay, that is Captain Benjamin Azariah's captain's insignia and his hat badge for that furry Russian hat. And is there any? We'll open the questions.
Is it true that submariners, after you spend a lot of time on a boat, have an odor of their own?
Yeah, that was more prevalent in the smoke boat days. Yeah. I do know of a couple of guys that got home and their wives would not allow their sea bag to go through the door. Okay. It's like, take it to the laundromat, right?
How did they stop the reactor and salvage those back out of the ships when they do? And there's a lot of radioactive material. And
all right, are you talking about when they decom a boat?
Reactor, yeah.
Okay, the core is removed, and yeah, let me go up here so I'm not. Don't want to. I'll put me in the satellite picture here. First thing they do is defuel. Okay, and that's actually easy. Everything is contaminated, and what they do after the defuel is they take and cut the reactor compartment out of the boat completely, sealed both ends of it, and they buried it in a trench up in Hanford, Washington. And there's a radioactive burial site there. And I've seen an aerial picture on just these cylinders all lined up, and they're all 30-foot diameter. So they don't try to decon all that. It's beyond the scope. Seal it up and bury it. But the fuel's been removed. Any other questions?
Whenever you guys cross the equator, you guys still do the King Neptune's court polywog thing or whatever? Or?
Oh God, yes. Except we were Northern Fleet. So, does anybody know what he's talking about?
Yeah.
Cross the equator, shellback. Cross the international date line, Golden Dragon.
Done that.
I'm a blue nose. Cross the Arctic Circle. And the ceremony for that is real obnoxious. I do have pictures.
You see they got a medal now for Arctic service going underneath.
Yeah. I got Ray Kissel has a medal for Antarctic service. Yeah. He was Ray was a CB construction battalion, and he spent a portion of his tour in Antarctica. I'm impressed. So.
That's something I didn't know.
Yeah.
Did he see any aliens down there?
See what? Oh, I have no idea what he saw down there. By the way, contrary to popular belief, Russians or submarines don't really have windows. We did have that section I called the sail that's above the people tube. The sail does have windows in it, but the sail is wet when you dive. So when we were on surface transit, I made it a practice at least once while we were on surface transit to get up in the sail, because I was below decks. I was an electrician, you know, and reactor operations and so on. That was my deal. But when I was not on watch and we were on surface, it's like, yeah, let me go see what it looks like. It's kind of neat. And I made it a ritual that at least once during each patrol cycle, I would get what's called periscope liberty, which is you're off watch and we are at periscope depth. Go to the control room and say, yeah, permission to, you know, it had to be daytime, but to look through the periscope and go, yep, sky's still there. Okay, we can continue now. Yeah, but yeah, patrols were interesting. Like I said, 4 knots to nowhere. Our job was to not be detected. The boomer life was the life to have, especially if you were married. If you were a single guy, yeah, tack boat, because they went everywhere. We saw a lot of Holy Lock. My fighting experience is mostly related to pubs in Dunoon, Scotland. So, yeah. Don't ask me for anything beyond, you know, how heavy is a pint of lager. I'm good with that. Anything else?
Were all your missiles MIRVs?
Yes.
They are.
Yeah.
Be close to a pound, but less.
Pardon?
Close to a pound, but less.
Yeah. Do you understand his question, MIRV? MIRV is a multiple re-entry vehicle, which means you had multiple warheads, and in the package, as it proceeded on its way, it'd go, okay, I got a target over here, we got to send one over that way, and then we got to send one over here, etc. So yeah, when you have the capability of delivering more than one warhead to multiple locations en route, you can produce quite a lot of hell, hate, and discontent.
24 missiles with multiple warheads.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah, that's just, now I was on a Lafayette, we were a Madison variant of a Lafayette class. And from the outside we were Lafayette, but from the inside there was a few movement of equipment in the Madison variant. The next variant was the 640 Benjamin Franklin variant. And again, from the outside, looked like the 16 Lafayette. But
What could you guys max out on when you're diving? Like, what was your max dive to?
okay, the answer to every submarine question is the same answer. Exact same answer, no matter what the question. The answer is too damn. How deep will it go? Too damn deep. How long is the patrol? Too damn long. How many men are on board? Too damn many. Same answer. So your question again? Too damn. And I've been out since '75, and I still can't tell you when yeah. So people would say, well, thank you for service. Say, well, technically it never happened. We were submarines. Cold War, we never went where we were and we didn't do what we did. Cold War never happened. We were never there. I don't exist.
Isn't there a limit to how deep a submarine can go?
They'll go all the way to the bottom if you don't stop them.
I mean, they can only go so far without being crushed.
Yeah, there's a max operational depth that we refer to as test depth. And then there's another depth that's called crush depth that, according to the book, at this depth,
How far is it, like 300 or 400 feet? Or?
we used to,
More than that.
we used to, normal ops was 300-400 feet. Yeah, a lot, let's just say, a lot deeper. Which reminds me, I had the honor of chatting with a World War II submariner at the VFW one time, and it caught me off. You know, standard questions: what was your rate? You know, and he was a gunner's mate. It's like gunner's mate. We didn't have such a thing on, you know, in my day on nukes, but he was on an S boat which had a max operational depth of 100 feet and a crush depth of 180 feet. Okay. And I mean, it was designed in 1924. And he asked me what kind of depth did we run at, and I said our normal ops is 300-400 feet, and he went white. The idea of taking a boat to 300 or 400 feet is just scary.
And that was a few months ago where those guys that went deep sea,
Yeah.
and it crushed them.
Oh yeah.
In the bath escape or whatever.
Well, no, it wasn't. But it was foolish, is what it was. Yeah, that was a carbon fiber the titanium in-bells did not distort on that boat, but the carbon fiber cylinder that was between them, all gone. I've seen the pictures of it, and that was foolish. I mean, they were driving it with a game controller. I'm sorry, it was 12,000 feet? No, that was just foolish.
Are you originally from Evansville?
I'm sorry?
Are you originally from Evansville?
Yes, sir. North High School, class of '66.
You ever watch the submarine races from Wrights Hill?
Oh, yeah. Now, yeah,
Never did see any submarines.
I went KSA program December 6, 1966. I went active on April 4th, 67. I got out July 23rd of 75 and went commercial nuke, and all my connections were no longer connected, and in April of 2016 I came home.
Do they have subs in Farragut up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho?
Idaho. Okay. In my day, and they don't do that today, but in my day, you went to what they call a schoolhouse, all right, which was classroom where, you know, you nuke power school. You started off in classrooms, and they started off day one with, you were learning math, physics, chemistry, metallurgy. I mean, you had 6 months, and they presented all that. You started off with 3-column addition in your math and took it to integral equations. You took your physics was Newtonian, drop the ball, hits the floor, into trajectory theory, right, all the way over to E equals mc squared, the mass decrement, right, of the fission particle due. Yeah, you went from Newtonian to Einsteinian physics, chemistry, metallurgy. It was huge, and then if you passed. And they had a really bad way of testing you, because they tested you on Monday morning for last week's material. And that'll screw up a weekend better than anything. Yeah, because your future is just based on what you do week to week here. And they're pouring so much at you so fast that you basically have got about a master's program in 6 months of school. Is what it amounts to, because you're doing 40 hours a week and you better be studying 6 hours a night.
You better get your sleep too, so you get into long-term memory.
And then if you pass nuke power school, you went to prototype. Prototype, way back before they built a submarine with a particular design configuration, what they would do was they would build a prototype of that would be the reactor and the engineering spaces only on dry land. And they would prove that it worked where it won't sink. And then once that was done, it would be used for experimentation, right, and training. So after you left Nuke Power School, you went to prototype for another 6 months. And you were hands-on learning and putting into application what you were learning in the schoolhouse. So besides boot camp and your A school, like electrician A school or ET or whatever, you have a year of just Nuke Power School. And it was quite intense. And if you so much as got a speeding ticket, Rick Over said, if I can't trust you to do the speed limit, I can't trust you to operate my reactor at less than 100% power. So, yeah, demonstrated unreliability, out. And I don't know how many guys. So the program lost about 50 to 60% out. Getting out the back door of Nuke Power School was a real challenge. I'm proud to make it. So they had a prototype in Connecticut, which was the Nautilus S1C design. S, submarine, 1, first design, C, combustion engineering. I went to the S3G at Capel, Knowles Atomic Power Lab in New York, and that's a submarine, 3rd generation General Electric, and then and they also had the D1G prototype there, also destroyer, 1st generation General Electric, and then out in Idaho, this is where you're getting that, they had another prototype for A1W aircraft, first design, Westinghouse, which was the prototype for the Enterprise. So a lot of training went on out in Idaho, a lot of training went off in New York, and some training went off in Connecticut.
They had submarines in that because the lake's so deep.
They do have, but not nukes. I do know of that lake.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, yeah, and it's not, that's like models where they were testing stuff. The real neat test driver was never in that lake. They had a nuke, not experimental, it was called NR1. It would look like a regular big submarine in shape and so on, except it was a lot smaller, only had a crew of 8 people, and there was no, really, there was any berthing. They would, I actually, when I had a 2-year shore duty hitch at subbase, and they put that thing up in dry dock once, NR1, and I had the fun time of doing some repairs on some of the electrical stuff on it. And when I first was told you got to go to NR1 and do this and so on, and I went, yeah, and they said, be sure to look at the wheels. I went, what? It's got wheels. It has wheels. Big underneath, one forward, one aft, because they would get so deep and they didn't want their systems to be sucking stuff off the bottom. So Yeah, this was a real deep diving experimental submarine. So if somebody come up and says, well, could happen if we had this? They go, I don't know, send that all around out and do it. Because she was capable of going way deeper than anything we had.
Literally driving.
Pardon?
Literally driving around on the seabed.
Yeah.
Lake bed.
But it was very slow. Its main propulsion was 2 electric motors that were on the stern planes. Yeah, 4-foot diameter props. She couldn't go out against the tide. Yeah, she'd only go out with the tide.
Got a question about life on board.
Sure.
I take a pill because of being claustrophobic.
It helps not to be.
Well, I wondered how it was. Would some of your shipmates, submarine mates,
Psychological screening occurred way before you got near a boat.
not that far?
Yeah.
But it never happened then.
I can't say never.
Yeah.
I can say that I never knew anybody that.
Well, that's what I was
Yeah.
interested in. I thought maybe I know they did that and read, looked at all that. But I just know, sometimes I'm in a doctor's office and they close the door and I've got to go open that door up,
Yeah.
So.
No, I was a lot littler than I am now.
Okay.
Like almost 100 pounds littler, and I was there was a, like I said, as an electrician, we had this one particular item that required heaters to be replaced on it, and you had this one little teeny hole between pipes that you could get to and skinny down to get to it, and I was the only guy small enough in the division to do that, so that was my honor. Thankfully.
The negative thing is you went to North. You didn't go to Wrights?
No, I went to North.
Okay, well, I was just checking. I thought I heard that. Do you know Leonard?
Who?
Leonard Carr?
No relation.
No?
No, my brother Alan went to North, and my brother Bob went to North, but that's all the cars in the area, and they are no longer around. Alan is in Florida, and Bob's in North Carolina. So
he went to school with my brother-in-law and was a teacher here in town, so he went.
I was a hot rodder back in the 60s.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So basically, with the nuke power stuff behind me, I classify myself as a geek that can weld. That's a heavy threat.
Hey, that's great.
Is anybody interested in a 31 Model A coupe? I may be able to put you. That's a hot rod sitting in winter storage right now.
Wow.
327 Chevy out of a 65 Impala right underneath the deck. It's nice. Anyway, any other questions?
Yeah. So you guys cross-train? Like for different jobs and stuff like that, you had to cross-train?
Yeah. I was specifically trained as an electrician, but my primary function was either electrical operator for electrical distribution on plant or throttles, and throttleman was a rather interesting device. We had a steam, reactor made heat, heat made steam, steam runs turbine, turbine runs propeller, move boat. But in the diesel electric World War II area, right, you had a diesel running a generator supplying power to a motor and to batteries.
Yes.
So the guy in maneuvering, which is the area, the control room for engineering is called maneuvering. The guy in maneuvering that was in charge of propulsion was an electrician. And when they got nukes going, they said, we have to have enough jobs to have enough men on board. So you got a watch station of electrical plant. You got a watch station of electrical roving watch. Puts his hands on motors and checks things out and so on. We needed another, because the electricians got to cover everything, the front end to the back. Okay, so we had to have enough jobs to warrant enough electricians on board. And they said, well, hey, Throttleman's always been an electrician. Yeah, but it's steam now. That's okay, he can run the steam. So yeah, I was, my favorite job was throttles. Yeah, because I had a big one to control the head throttle and a smaller one, a wheel inside a wheel, right? the head throttle and the stern throttle. Actually, the throttleman controlled more reactor power than the reactor operator. That's we get into physics to actually make that make sense, but it's true. You know, I made more reactivity changes on our boat than the reactor operator did.
Like dipping the rods up and down?
I didn't know. The way it's designed, the steam demand will control reactor power. The rods were moved just to maintain the average temperature of the core, okay? But the steam that came out of the system, right, changed the temperature of the water. Now we're getting into reactor physics.
So you're regulating steam more than the rods?
Right.
Okay.
That the water temperature changed power more than the rods. Rods just said how much power can you make, okay? And if we get, 6 or 7 weeks, I'll go into reactor physics on that, but we don't want to do that here. Anything else?
How many submarines are there around in the ocean from different countries? And then what percentage of those are U.S.?
Too damn, man.
Too damn? Good answer. He's trainable. Right now, in that one little film, the gal referenced the Tennessee class. That was the Ohio class. All right, you named the class for the first boat in the class. Okay? And when they converted the ballistic missile submarine, Fleet Ballistic Missile Submarine Ohio itself, from ballistic missiles over to guided missiles, the SSBN, Ship Submersible Ballistic Nuclear, SSBN, okay? They converted the Ohio over to a guided missile platform. That's part of the strategic arms limitation to how many missiles and how many boats we can have and so on. And in doing that, and they were talking ballistic missiles. So they took 4 of the Ohio class boats and decommed them as ballistic missile subs, and then reloaded their tubes with a special package of Tomahawk cruise missiles. So now the Ohio and the other 3 that went with her are SSGNs. And when Ohio was no longer an SSBN, as they identify in that film, that now is the lead boat is now the Tennessee. Okay? So that's why she referenced the Tennessee class. Us purists, it'll always be the Ohio class.
How many submarines do they have, like, per class?
There's no real limit on that. Right now, I'm pretty sure we have somewhere between, I think we have 14 Tennessee class and 4 Ohio class. And those are your missile boats. The Virginia class is replacing the Los Angeles class, and I believe we still have somewhere, the 2 combined right now, I think, to about 60 boats. Los Angeles class. As they put a new Virginia class out, they take a Los Angeles class out of commission, and that's where prototypes are now. They take decommissioned boats and they tie them up on the Cooper River in Charleston, and now what was a missile compartment is now classrooms, okay? And then the reactor and engineering is there, and so the classroom and prototype is all one unit sitting in the water. So that's why the prototypes don't exist anymore to speak of. So it's now training in what they refer to as moored training ship, MTSs.
And then by other countries that would have similar?
Yeah, Russia's still got quite a fleet. Most of their fleet is parked.
Huh?
Most of the Russian fleet is parked. but they do have some newer boats that are serious concerns. The Borelli class is a serious. That's basically the projects that were followed, like the Kursk. Remember the Kursk lost in the Barents Sea, and that has been determined to be one of their torpedoes went off in the torpedo room. They were playing with hydrogen peroxide propellant, and does not do well. If you get hydrogen peroxide as propellant and any kind of oil in the same spot, bad.
They run, there was one of the drag strips, somebody had a hydrogen peroxide powered.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah, it works.
I don't know how.
They're dangerous as hell. But yeah, the British played with hydrogen peroxide propellant torpedoes some, and they blew up a couple and said, okay, we're getting away from that. So yeah, most people that have tried playing with it have left them alone.
Most of those dragsters run nitromethane.
Yeah.
98%. Some used to run 100%, but I think that maybe had a few explosions.
Yeah.
They kind of tuned it down to.
So I'm still connected in the community, if you wish, and I'm in contact with about 700 of my shipmates that served on the boat. But sadly, I talked about the Reunion Association. John Truby passed away. He was my VP. Dale Shoflin was my webmaster. He's passed away, and the treasurer and the storekeeper had a massive stroke a year and a half ago, and so now I'm treasurer and webmaster and storekeeper and region coordinator. So.
And dishwasher and
chief cook and bottle washer.
That's it. That pretty much. And
But subs are called boats, not ships.
that's tradition goes back to the birth of the submarine. The submarines. The birthday of a submarine is April 11th. In April 11th, 1900, John Holland sold the first submarine, operational submarine, to the Navy. It was a little bitty thing. It was carried on. You can put a boat on a ship, but you can't put a ship on a boat. That's how you deal with it. So the first submarine was a little bitty boat, right? Gas-powered engine for running on the surface, battery submerged, one torpedo, okay? And its job was put it in the water, go do its job, come back, put it out, right? That's what they were, little bitty things, and they were called boats. And today, at 18,000 tons and 560 foot long, it's still a boat.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's just tradition.
Anything else in the Navy is a ship.
Right.
If it's over like, isn't it like 200 feet, it's a ship or something like that, usually? I can't remember.
Air carriers over 1,000.
Yeah, it's huge. Those are like little cities.
Just over 1,000.
Little, huge.
Huge cities. They got their own post office and everything.
I used to know what my gun was.
I spent about 12 years on LSC 325, and that they're all impressed that it's a ship. And it's like, yeah, well, it's, you know, what was it, 1,400 tons? And if fully loaded was 3,600 tons. And they go, that's a ship. And I'm going, yeah, right. Mine was 8,000 tons, and it was a boat.
Appreciate you coming.
Not a problem.
Yeah. Enjoy.
Not a problem. Enjoy it. Thank you. Quite welcome. We get to shut down now.